My hands shook as I stared at my glucose meter, 385, that couldn't be right. I'd been meticulously tracking my insulin doses, following my routine perfectly. This was the third time this week my blood sugar had skyrocketed, despite doing everything correctly. Maybe you miscounted your carbs again, Jake said from the doorway, making me jump. My older brother leaned against the frame, a strange smirk playing on his lips. My name is Emma Mitchell, and at 24, I'd been managing my type 1 diabetes successfully for over a decade, until now. I know how to count carbs, Jake, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady while preparing another insulin dose. Something's not right, he shrugged, watching me draw up the insulin. You've always been dramatic about your condition. Maybe if you weren't so lazy about exercise. I ignored him, focusing on the task at hand, but his words stung. He'd always resented the attention my diabetes required, even when we were kids. Since moving back home to help care for Mom after her surgery, his attitude had only gotten worse. Later that evening, during dinner, I felt the telltale signs of low blood sugar, shaky hands, cold sweat, confusion. But that was impossible. I'd just tested high. Emma, Mom's voice sounded distant. Honey, are you okay? The room started spinning. The last thing I saw before everything went black was Jake's face, not concerned, but watching with an unsettling intensity. I woke up in the hospital, the steady beep of monitors filling the room. Mom sat beside my bed, her face etched with worry. Your blood sugar crashed, she explained. The paramedics said, you were dangerously low. How did that happen? That's what I'd like to know, said Dr. Peters, entering the room. She'd been my endocrinologist since diagnosis. Emma, your insulin levels were far too high for the dose you reported taking. Are you sure about your measurements? I'm always sure, I insisted. Something's wrong with my insulin. Or someone's wrong with it, Dr. Peters said carefully. The concentration in your latest pen was nearly double what it should be. Mom's face paled. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we need to test Emma's insulin supplies, all of them, and file a police report. That's when Jake burst in, all concerned brother now. A police report? Come on, it's obviously just a mistake. Emma's probably stressed and miscounting. I'm not miscounting. The pieces started falling into place. His hovering, the smirk, the strange comments. You did something, didn't you? Emma, Mom gasped. How could you accuse your brother? Because he's always resented my diabetes. He thinks I use it for attention. Jake's face darkened. You do use it for attention. Poor little Emma, always needs watching, always needs special treatment. Maybe you needed a lesson in real responsibility. The room went silent. Even Jake seemed shocked by his own admission. Get out, Dr. Peters said firmly, before I call security. As Jake backed out of the room, Mom looked torn between her children. He didn't mean it, she said weakly. He's just upset. But I'd seen his face when he said those words. He meant everyone. The police came to take statements, but without concrete proof, they couldn't do much. Mom insisted it was all a misunderstanding, that Jake would never deliberately hurt me. She begged me to let it go, to come home and work things out as a family. He's your brother, she pleaded. Family forgives. But as I lay in that hospital bed, thinking about how close I'd come to dying, I knew this wasn't something I could forgive. Jake hadn't just played a prank, he'd deliberately tampered with my medication, knowing exactly what it could do to me. I refused to return home, moving in with my best friend Sarah instead. Mom called daily, trying to convince me I was overreacting. Jake sent texts apologizing, claiming he'd just been trying to scare me, to teach me not to take my special treatment for granted. I blocked his number. What I didn't know then was that Mom would soon discover something that would shatter her illusions about her perfect son forever. 2 weeks after the incident, I was still staying at Sarah's apartment, trying to rebuild my sense of safety. Every time I took my insulin, I triple-checked the dosage, paranoia creeping in at each injection. The trust I'd built in managing my condition had been shattered. Then came the call that changed everything. Emma? Mom's voice trembled on the phone. I need you to come over. I found something in Jake's room. I'm not coming if he's there. He's at work. Please, honey, you need to see this. Something in her voice made me agree. When I arrived, Mom sat at the kitchen table, a leather-bound notebook in front of her. Her hands shook as she pushed it toward me. I was cleaning his room, she whispered. It fell from behind his dresser. The journal's first entry was dated 3 months ago, right when I moved back home. Emma's back, playing the perfect daughter again. Mom can't stop talking about how brave she is. Managing her diabetes while helping with her recovery. Makes me sick. Always the martyr. Well, I've got plans for her. My stomach churned as I read on. Page after page detailed his growing resentment, his careful research into insulin concentrations, his methodical tampering with my medication. He'd been diluting some doses and concentrating others, intentionally destabilizing my blood sugar levels for weeks. But what made Mom finally break down wasn't just the proof of his tampering, it was what he wrote about Dad. If I'd known more about insulin back when Dad was alive, maybe his accident would have worked better. Emma's going to be a good practice run. Dad had died 5 years ago, from what we thought was an accidental insulin overdose. He'd been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes just months before, and we'd assumed he was still learning to manage his medication. Mom's hands covered her face. The police, she choked out. They need to see this. I called Sarah, who worked as a legal assistant. Within hours, she had helped us contact detectives and secure the journal as evidence. Mom gave a statement, her voice stronger now, anger replacing denial. Jake came home to find police cars outside our house. I watched from Sarah's car as they led him out in handcuffs, his face twisted with rage when he spotted me. "You'll always be the victim, won't you, Emma?" he shouted across the yard, always finding ways to get attention. But his words had no power anymore. The journal had exposed the truth. This wasn't about attention or resentment. My brother was dangerous, possibly even a murderer. The investigation into Dad's death was reopened. Mom moved in with our aunt, unable to stay in the house with so many tainted memories. I focused on healing, not just physically but emotionally, working with a therapist to process the betrayal. One evening, as I sat with Mom reviewing cold case files the police had shared about Dad's death, she turned to me with tears in her eyes. "I should have believed you immediately," she said. "When you suggested Jake had tampered with your insulin, I should have." I took her hand. "You wanted to believe in the good in him. We all did." She squeezed my hand back. "I keep thinking about all the signs I missed. With you, with your father. How did I not see what he was?" The police investigation revealed more than we could have imagined. Jake's computer showed searches about insulin manipulation dating back years. There were files about other diabetics in our community, suggesting he might have had more targets planned. As the evidence mounted, I received an unexpected message from Jake's ex-girlfriend, Maria. "I should have warned you," she wrote. 3 years ago, I found similar journal entries about his fascination with insulin deaths. When I confronted him, he convinced me I was paranoid. I was too scared to tell anyone. I'm so sorry." The guilt in her message reflected what many of us felt. We had all seen pieces of Jake's darkness, but had chosen to look away, to make excuses, to preserve the image of family harmony. Mom threw herself into helping the investigation, determined to make up for her initial denial. She provided years of family medical records, insurance documents, anything that might help build the case against Jake, and possibly bring justice for Dad. But as we dug deeper into the past, we discovered Jake's journal wasn't his only hidden record. There was another notebook, concealed in the attic, that would reveal an even darker truth about my brother's obsession. The second notebook was found during a thorough police search of our attic. Unlike the first journal, this one was filled with newspaper clippings about insulin-related deaths across 3 states, dating back to Jake's college years. Next to each article were detailed notes, calculations, and what appeared to be practice runs. "Your brother didn't start with your father," Detective Morris explained gently. "We've linked him to 3 other suspicious deaths at the hospital, where he worked as an administrative assistant." The revelation hit Mom like a physical blow. All those years Jake had worked in hospital administration, having access to patient records, medication logs. It hadn't been about building a career. He'd been hunting. The investigation expanded, pulling in federal authorities. Jake's past was excavated, revealing a pattern none of us had seen, or perhaps had refused to see. Every job he'd held had given him access to vulnerable people with diabetes. Every move he'd made had been calculated. During his initial interrogation, Jake remained silent, that same smirk playing on his lips. But when confronted with both journals, his composure cracked. "You don't understand," he told the detectives. "People like Emma, they get everything: sympathy, attention, care. Their weakness becomes their strength." I wanted to show how fragile that strength really was. His confession was cold, clinical. He spoke about his victims like they were science experiments, including our father, especially our father. Dad always favored Emma, after her diagnosis, he said. Everything became about protecting precious Emma. He needed to understand what it felt like to be truly vulnerable. Mom couldn't bear to attend the court hearings, but I went to every one. I needed to see justice served, not just for me and Dad, but for all of Jake's victims. As the evidence mounted, families of other suspected victims came forward. The true scope of his crimes began to emerge. Sarah sat with me through the trials, holding my hand as victims' families testified. Their stories echoed mine: mysterious blood sugar crashes, inexplicable complications, deaths that had been attributed to poor diabetes management. Jake's ex-girlfriend Maria testified about the warning signs she'd noticed, her voice shaking as she expressed her regret for staying silent. Each testimony added another brick to the wall of evidence against my brother. The day of sentencing, I finally stood up to give my victim impact statement. Jake sat at the defendant's table, still wearing that subtle smirk, but I refused to let him intimidate me anymore. My brother didn't just try to kill me, I told the court. He tried to kill my trust, my independence, my ability to manage my own health. But he failed. I'm not a victim of diabetes, and I'm not a victim of his cruelty. I'm a survivor. The judge sentenced Jake to life imprisonment, without the possibility of parole. As they led him away, he turned to me one last time. "You'll always need someone to take care of you, Emma," he called out. Remember that, but he was wrong. In the months that followed, I became an advocate for medical abuse awareness, working with diabetes support groups to help identify and prevent medication tampering. Mom joined me, turning her guilt into action by establishing a foundation in Dad's name to support families affected by medical abuse. The day we launched the foundation, Mom found me checking my blood sugar before the ceremony. "I used to watch you do that and worry," she admitted. "Now I see it differently. It's not weakness, it's strength, taking control of your health despite everything." I smiled, recording my numbers with steady hands. That's what Jake never understood. Managing diabetes doesn't make me vulnerable. It makes me powerful. A year after Jake's sentencing, I stood before a room full of medical professionals, sharing my story at a conference on patient safety. My experience had led to new protocols in hospitals and pharmacies, protecting other vulnerable patients from predators like my brother. The biggest lesson, I told them, is that family ties don't excuse medical abuse. The people closest to us can sometimes be the most dangerous, especially when they have access to our medication. Mom sat in the front row, tears in her eyes but her head held high. We both learned the hard way that real family protects, supports, and believes each other. Jake might have shared our blood, but he'd never understood what family truly meant. As I finished my speech, I checked my glucose meter one last time. Perfect numbers. In trying to destroy me, Jake had ultimately made me stronger, more vigilant, and more determined to help others. That was a lesson I knew would haunt him in his prison cell for the rest of his life.